The two pillars of the EU, France and Germany, were shaken by war. The collapse of the French government and the ruling coalition in Germany has caused continuous crises for both countries. And the root of it all is related to the Ukraine conflict. We can draw two key lessons from the collapse of Prime Minister Michel Barnier's French government. First is Europe's attempt at rearmament, with the desire to replace the US as the primary sponsor of Ukraine while still maintaining social welfare policies. This is unrealistic, as their economies stagnate and inflation leads to budget deficits. Second is the ongoing political crisis that has led to the paralysis of the government, causing domestic and foreign policy decisions to be equally paralyzed. France and Germany, the leading countries in Europe's economy and defense, face severe political crises. In just 1 month, both countries witnessed the collapse of their governments due to rising budget deficits, and the financial difficulties of France and Germany have been exacerbated by economic stagnation and financial support for Ukraine. Europe's economy failed to expand at the end of 2023, dragging out the stagnation for more than a year amid higher energy prices, costlier credit, and a downturn in former powerhouse Germany. According to figures released Tuesday by EU statistics agency Eurostat, zero economic growth for the October to December period of last year follows a 0.1% contraction in the 3 months before that. That extends a miserable run of economic blahs. The 20 countries that use the euro currency have not shown significant growth since the third quarter of 2022, when the economy grew by 0.5%. And the start of this year looks no better, with indicators of business activity still flashing red for contraction. Plus, disruptions to shipping in the Red Sea have constricted global trade through the Suez Canal, a major route between Asia and Europe, surging shipping costs and threatening to boost inflation. In the case of France, economic stagnation and President Macron's austerity measures have led to widespread discontent among the French people, resulting in a loss for his party in the European Parliament elections in June this year. Subsequently, President Macron called for an unexpected French parliamentary election, hoping that French voters, concerned about the rise of far-right leader Marine Le Pen, would rally behind his centrist left wing. However, the outcome was that Le Pen's party won most of the votes. Macron then abandoned his left-wing allies and struck a deal where Le Pen would support a centrist conservative government under Prime Minister Michel Barnier, in exchange for concessions on immigration and other policy issues. However, government prosecutors later sought to prosecute Le Pen to prevent her from participating in politics and running for president in 2027. This prompted Le Pen to seek the overthrow of Barnier's government, hoping it would lead to the downfall of Macron and early presidential elections. Given the series of failures President Macron has faced throughout the past year, his resignation is the most reasonable course of action. The political crisis unfolded in Germany a few years later than in France. After the 2021 general elections, the decline in support for Chancellor Scholz's Social Democratic Party and the rise of the far-right party Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, and the populist left-wing Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, BSW, forced the Social Democratic Party to form a coalition with the Free Democratic Party, FDP, and the Greens. As Germany's economic situation worsened, internal budgetary battles escalated until Chancellor Scholz's coalition collapsed. If Germany's economic difficulties persist and support for the coalition parties continues to decrease, the far-right AfD and BSW will become the only options for dissatisfied German voters. However, most of the leadership within the EU and NATO, particularly those following neoliberal policies, continue to act as though nothing significant is happening. As a result, the Foreign Affairs magazine on December 3rd suggested that to prevent Trump from pushing for an unfavorable peace agreement with Ukraine, a European Union coalition force of at least 4 to 5 multinational brigades should be deployed to eastern Ukraine to stop further Russian advances. Air combat patrols by Europe could be deployed while the war is still ongoing. And, if Russia continues to resist, Europe will finance its efforts to support Ukraine in a prolonged conflict. This publication overlooks the fact that Europe will have to source funds to cover the war costs for Ukraine, and whether the Russians will allow EU and NATO forces to enter eastern Ukraine while the war is still ongoing. Indeed, we all know the answer. UK job vacancies have fallen fastest since the pandemic as business confidence slumps. The number of job vacancies in November fell at the fastest rate since the start of the pandemic, as business confidence slumped to its lowest level in almost 2 years, according to 2 new reports. In a damaging blow to the government's efforts to boost growth, the latest monthly report on the job market from accountancy firm KPMG and the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, REC, found demand for staff declined at a sharp and accelerated pace last month, with the steepest fall in vacancies since August 2020. November marked the 13th month of a fall in staff demand, with an especially severe drop among vacancies for permanent workers, in the latest sign of a further deterioration in the UK labour market. Businesses are having to weigh up the prospect of increasing employee costs following the budget, which has led to an accelerated slowdown in hiring activity across the board, said John Holt, Group Chief Executive at KPMG. Meanwhile, business confidence has fallen to its lowest since January last year, as companies face increased costs and faltering consumer demand, according to accountancy company BDO. Keir Starmer has made expanding the economy and improving living standards a central mission of the Labour government. However, a rise in business taxes in the budget in October was met with dismay by many business leaders, who appear to have depressed investment and recruitment across many industrial and service sectors. BDO said its index measuring business output recorded its lowest reading since October last year, despite the golden quarter of trading in the Christmas period, which is usually the most lucrative time for businesses. The output index contracted in November, the first time this year, signaling that the UK economy shrank last month. December marks the end of a tough couple of years for businesses, and the drop in business confidence this month is not a surprise given the significant challenges they continue to face. The KPMG REC report said the slowdown in the jobs market and an increasing number of candidates could put more downward pressure on wage inflation. The report found that November's wage inflation remained unchanged from October's 44-month low. Last month, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said retailers are right to warn of potential job cuts due to tax increases announced in Chancellor Rachel Reeves's first budget in October. The British Retail Consortium estimates that retailers will face a 2.3 billion bill from April after the implementation of the rise in employer NICs from 13.8% to 15%, as well as the reduction in the earnings threshold when firms must start paying it, from $9,100 to $5,000. The rise in NICs will come into force next April, alongside a significant increase in the national minimum wage, which retailers claim will cost them a further 2.7 billion. The real question is whether businesses will return to the market as they go into next year with greater certainty about the path ahead, said Neil Carberry, Chief Executive of the REC. The resilience of temporary recruitment offers some hope. Firms will likely rest more on temps while managing the current uncertainty. Last week, Bailey indicated that there could be 4 interest rate cuts next year, one more than the markets have factored in. The prospect of further rate cuts through 2025, alongside the government's investment plans, both point to improved growth in the near term, said Holt. This should give businesses greater confidence, which may help stabilize the labor market.